Hey, what's going on YouTube and the Gospel Gambit chess school community? My name's Kevin, aka Gospel Gambit, and I want to welcome you guys in for my second ever opening guide. Today we're going to be diving into white versus the Scandinavian defense, and specifically versus the Queen A5 line by black. We're going to be diving into the Leonhardt Gambit, which is one of my favorite openings to play on the white side of the pieces whenever I see my opponent play 1d5 after I've played 1e4. This video is just going to give you a brief background of what this course is going to entail. And this first video is going to give you an idea of the numbers and kind of what the accepted and what the declined basics look like right off the bat. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Like I recommend, we always play 1e4. And obviously the Scandinavian defense starts with 1d5 from black. You're going to see this response. There's over 200 million games in the Lichess database with 1d5. And you should always take this pawn here on d5. It continues your advantage as white. And if you don't take that pawn, you're giving black everything they want out of the opening by move 2. So by the time that we take this pawn, 136 million games have been played from e takes d. And at this position, black has a few different options. 75% of your games, black is going to retake with the queen, and that's what we're going to mainly be looking at. And the other games, other 25% of your games, you're going to see black play knight to f6 and recapture the pawn later. Now, we're not going to dive into any of the knight f6 lines in this guide, but look in the future for possible opening recommendations against that sort of line versus black. Like I said, you're going to see that in about 25% of your games. Most of the time, I just recommend giving the pawn back. You can play d4, bring your knight out to f3, bishop out to f2 or d3, and then just castle and just play a normal game of chess. That's the most straightforward way of going with things if you see that knight f6. From here, though, we're going to take a look at black taking on d5 with their queen. Again, that happens in about 75% of those games that you're going to see, or about 98 million times on the Lichess database. And from here, of course, we want to continue our development with knight to c3. We develop a piece, and we force black to move their queen again. And in this position, black has a few different options. They can bring the queen all the way back to d8. That's the classic Scandinavian, bringing it back. And you'll see that in about 1/3 of your games. The second most played move is queen to a5, and that's what this guide is going to be all about. How do we attack and play a pretty creative line here versus the queen a5 Scandinavian defense. And then other lines that you might see would either be queen to e5 check or queen to e6 check. With any of these lines, I just recommend playing the bishop out to e2. Your next move is probably going to be knight to f3 and just castle. This open e-file, if black moves their queen here, obviously our knight out to f3 hits them. If they go to queen to e5, we also have d4 coming down the pipeline, and our rook is going to be able to get to this e-file fairly quickly. So, like I said, if you see any of these two moves, you can pretty much just block with your bishop and continue your normal development in your game. The queen d8 we're not going to look at in this guide, but same idea, you can play d4 and play normal developing moves and castle early, and you're going to get a solid game from the white side of the pieces. But a more exciting game is when we see black play this move, queen to a5. They want to put our knight in a pin if we end up playing d3 or d4 and give us some problems here on the c3 square. And we are going to try to take black right out of their opening preparation. So about 22 million games, go queen to a5. And we are going to take those 22 million games and boil them down to less than a million. The Leonhardt Gambit starts with b4. Less than a million games have been played in this position, about 750,000 games, give or take, or about 3% of queen a5 Scandinavians. So If black plays this Queen A5 Scandinavian, they've seen this less than 3% of the time in their games. And if you turn on the computer evaluation, it's completely even position, even though we're giving up a full pawn to black. And the idea behind this is we are opening up the B file. So black has pretty much 3 options here that are serious. They can take this pawn on B4. That's the accepted lines, and we'll dive into those on chapter 2 in our second video. And the other options are either queen to E5 check or queen to B6, and we're going to dive into those on the third video, or the decline lines. So from here, what's kind of the main ideas? We'll take a look to see what happens after queen to B4. Well, the main idea is that our rook is going to get to this open B file, half open B file, fairly quickly. Blacks now move their queen once, twice, 3 times, and they're going to move their queen a 4th time here in the opening. We get access to this half open B file, and B7 starts to turn into a weak point for black. They have a difficult time with ever developing this light squared bishop, because they're going to obviously have to move their queen off of this file right now. So if they ever, let's say, move back, you'll see this in a lot of games. We're able to just snag this pawn here on B7. A lot of, I'd say, Scandinavian players love this pin against our knight here on F3, and you'll win a few games with just being able to pick up this B pawn and causing chaos here on black's queen side. Another point of this opening is that if black ends up, let's say, going back to A5, well, our rook gets access to the 5th rank supported by our knight, and all of a sudden black is in some very tricky situations. As you can see, the computer, there's only an only mover here that black has to find, otherwise they're down a complete rook in the opening. And even after A5, it starts getting tricky as we start having discovered attacks on black's queen. And the other big advantage that we'll go over way more in depth in the second video is that we get access to the 3rd rank for our rook. A lot of times games are going to develop, black will kind of tuck their queen away somewhere, whether it's over here on the king side or back here on D6. And we're both going to be able to develop some pieces. Like I said, we're going to give black a little issue with this light squared bishop. And you're going to be able to get your rook quickly to the 3rd rank and all the way over to the G or the H file. Now, why is that so important? Well, in these types of games, black isn't going to be able to castle queenside, or they really shouldn't, just because of this half open file. We're going to have a killer attack if black decides to go with the normal development and tries to get their king over to the queen side. So a lot of times you're going to see black develop quickly here on the king side, and that is why we want to be able to bring our queenside rook into the attack on the king side. You know, in a lot of chess games, a couple pieces sometimes get left on the sidelines when you're going in for an attack, because it just takes too many moves to get them in range of your opponent's king, or they're just awkwardly placed. Well, by opening up this B file here with tempo, later on in the game, we could easily see a rook on B3. If black's queen ever is on these dark squares, we have even the option to play bishop to A3, driving it further away. Or, like I said, swinging this rook over to H3 or G3. And a lot of times you're going to see our knights start swarming in on black's king here, as they're going to be connected here on the E4 and G5. And we even get ideas of the Greek gift sacrifice here on H7. And being able to swing this rook over to support this Greek sacrifice is a huge concept in lines in the accepted variation. So, without further ado, guys, this is going to be another 3-part series similar to the Scorpion Horse Gambit. This is just the opening guide, the opening video. The second and third videos, which will be out later this week, one will go over the accepted variation and the different lines you might see out of that. And the third video will go over the decline variations, mainly concerning with queen b6 or queen e5 And by decline variations, I mean if black does not take this pawn here on b4. So this position, they would be either going to b6 or queen to e5. And we'll take a look at both of those as they are the second and third most played moves in this position. 75% of your games, you're going to see black take the pawn, and that's when all the fun and exciting stuff starts to happen. And about the other 20 to 25% of games, you'll see them decline and play these two moves. So hopefully you guys are excited for this opening series. It's one of my favorite openings. As we go into further videos, I'll show you what my stats look like having played these openings on both my Lead Chess and Chess.com account, and how you can really use this opening as well as in your over-the-board games. I do have a win over the board playing a classical game with this variation. So I hope you guys are excited, and we'll see you guys in the next two videos. Have a good night.